Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions. And I do mean all of them. Tonight's special guest, Amy Newman, who has their own channel. Amy, would you tell everyone what you do over there at Amy Newman?
Why, hello there, interwebs. My name is Amy Newman, and I host a skeptic comedy channel along with my co-host, James W. And we have all sorts of debates, discussions, and open mics for people to come have fun.
And tonight we thought we might, if the video plays, I had my other computer fail yesterday. It lost its cooling fan. And now you don't really need to mute. I don't think anyone's going to notice the background video playing. I mean, you're awfully sweet. Don't get me wrong. That's awfully nice, but I don't think it's necessary. So the cooling fan failed, and I had to go ahead and get a computer today and set it all up by now, which was
Really?
for a 53-year-old guy pretty challenging because I'm pretty computer illiterate, actually.
Well, it always sucks when something happens right before you're about to do something.
You know, it
Which
does.
is what
I've got
always
3
happens.
streams in a row each evening starting tonight. So I wasn't about to play around and say, oh, let's delay this or something. Just go out and get a different one.
Stick with what works.
Yeah, so far, so far. Okay, so what I originally proposed to do, and if I can get this thing to work right, I can't guarantee that, because this would be literally the first time I've done this on live stream with this computer for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. But Amy has agreed to review with me the what do you call that? A trailer video or introduction video to your channel?
Sure. I would say both would be accurate. It's sort of an introduction to what the channel may be, but I also tried to beef it up in a way that would kind of be in the trailer style. Just mostly because I like video editing and stock footage.
Right on. I want to say, first of all, before we even get into the video, and welcome Mac and Titan Uranus.
Hi, Mac.
And Pat Lowinger. I do not know that photo nor name. This is one of your friends, yeah?
This is. Pat is fantastic. He's an archaeologist and one of the skeptic crew along with Bird. What is up, Bird? And Mac, thank you so very much for the awesome words. So thank you all in chat. Send in love.
Right on.
And Titan, just because I like to say Titan Uranus out loud as often as possible.
We all need goals, right? Okay, so you know, Titan corrects those recordings and plans on doing a compilation eventually. Although I've never seen it.
Oh, see? Now that is a movie I need to see.
Right on. He's always asking people, hey, would you please say? And so I purposely, from the first time it asked me, I have mispronounced it on purpose in a myriad of ways.
Oh my.
Tonight,
at the right times, of course.
Tonight it's Titan Uranus.
Uranus.
Yeah, that's which is wrong, but that's okay.
Sometimes Uranus needs a little spice. That's
right. You know, actually, on second thought, maybe not. A lot of spices are kind of, chemically.
Well, that's true. Now that I think about it, that might not be a good experience.
Okay, so tell me when you're ready, and we'll give this video thing a try.
All right, I'm excited.
All right, cool. So I'm going to be switching, sorry, side chat. I'm going to be switching to another screen so I can control that video. And I want to watch it all the way through. It's not very long in the first place. What do you say we watch it all the way through, and then we'll look at things that pop out at me, okay?
Sure, sounds good.
By the way, I thought this was very artfully done. And I thought you were subtle and tasteful in the clips that you chose, that they weren't too too vulgar, but yet got the idea across in each case. I thought it was great anyway.
Well, thank you so
Talk
very
about the
much.
topic and why there doesn't seem to be any good reason for a deity to exist. And I find this can be a hard subject for theists who want to get.
Now what? Okay. Amy, are you still there?
I'm
as
still here.
far away from their specific deities as possible. Which makes sense, because in a world increasingly defined by science and technology, room for a god to be hiding in some small crevice behind a rock diminishes. Thus, the path of argument normally starts with Jesus, but if they talk to a skeptic long enough, it's funny how much the conversation begins to switch to, can we really know anything at all? I mean, do we even know if we're just brains and vats? Which is the kind of arguments we get from snake oil salesmen. Nowhere at any time in a debate on God has any theist given evidence that could pass empirical testing. Instead, we're left with texts from thousands of years ago with prophets doing the equivalent of magic tricks. Moses parting the Red Sea, Jesus coming back from the dead, and Muhammad riding over the moon on a horse. Sweet, that's a 3-act show. Even includes a pony. You would think a deity or the creator of the universe would have an easier time communicating with his creations. Turning water into wine and conjuring zombies is neat, but what I really seek in a personal relationship is the person to be real. He seemed to love showing up thousands of years ago, but unless we can go on a date together, I'm going to have to turn the possibility of a God down. Instead, this nebulous, floating consciousness seems to be a plot device created by humans who are still trying to figure the world out. I'm sure the world's holy books, if carefully mined, could have nuggets of metaphorical truth in them. However, the same could be said of any other book, including The Lord of the Rings, which I think has more wisdom than all of the world's religions combined. If we've made it this far, most theists will start to make deistic arguments like the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of a God, which is a great public relations name because, to no one's surprise, it's not an argument for the existence of a God, but special pleading for a being to ignore causality. So are there any good reasons for a God to exist? Simple answer, no. But hey, if they want to change our mind, the lab is always open.
Mm-hmm.
I thought.
So I thought that was a great video, actually. So of course, you know, the minor fall and the major lift, something like that. So of course, I'm here to critique it with you and say what I honestly think about it from a theistic
Sure.
position. So I think, first of all, that you were expecting that, and I think I didn't hide that in any way from you. Okay, that's just to be fair. So I've designed for reaction to this video a set of logical, although this was very logical for certain reasons I'll talk about in just a minute, but I've put together a logical argument and I've put together a biblical argument against this.
Okay.
And that's because you definitely are saying, I see Christians do. The funny thing is, I agree with you. I do see Christians doing exactly these things. and I took a little note on that, and if I missed something, please inform me. But it seemed like the major topics throughout this were, um, please, when is a lack of necessity, backstepping and hiding amongst God of the gaps, reducing assertions until claiming ignorance, giving no empirical evidence, appeals to things supernatural when you don't have any other explanation of things, claiming a quad omni God and then denying that God's own abilities to do certain things that are not logically impossible, appealing to chronological hiddenness, appealing to unembodied mind, lacking evidence for deity being anything other than a plot device, failing to give persuasive evidence that any God exists. I think that covers it pretty good. Does that seem about right?
Those sounded like a good list of things that I commonly get from theists and more overtly creationists and sometimes presuppositionalists.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I don't personally consider myself an apologist. I just think that if something makes sense, you might have to go into a lot of detail about all the repercussions of it. But I think the overall explanation should be elegant. And when someone of science says elegant, they mean that it fits all of the logical standards that science should comply with. That is, it makes no unnecessary assumptions. It describes the situation well, and it doesn't describe some other situation. It has predictive power within itself. It's coherent within itself. If possible, it should be correspondent to reality as well, right? And hopefully, if it speaks of some future event, that future event is at least plausible in reality and physics. If all that makes sense.
Yes, I would just add on one last thing to that.
Oh, I forgot something.
Oh, well, I would say repeatability. So all of those things plus the ability to do the experiment over and over and over again.
Oh, sure. When it comes to physical things, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Repeatability. Yeah. Falsifiability and repeatability are necessary for any kind of physical evidence. Yeah. Can't argue that at all. I didn't specifically say that, though. You're right. I didn't. Okay. So I would ask people to please keep a close eye on me to see that I'm not trying to escape in one of these ways. Because if I am doing that, first of all, I'd like to know it and I'd like to stop. Because if I'm aware that I'm doing it and I do it continuously after that, that's called dishonest. If I'm aware that another person is right and I'm still doing it, that's called lying. And I don't want to be perceived as a liar or someone who's dishonest. That's not really what I'm going for here.
No, and it seems like you're just trying to get to the truth. And I think I come from the same perspective. All I really want to know is what actually is happening in reality, what is being represented in this, what seems to be shared experience. Yeah.
Well, it better be a shared experience. And if it isn't, I'm extremely self-deprecating. I sometimes hate myself when I feel like I like myself, which that's weird. And I make up people to torture me.
And as Titan would say, solipsis unite.
Exactly. I love it. He's so smart. It's weird. Anyway, I really like. And okay, so would you prefer like a biblical refutation or a logical refutation, or just go hog wild and do both?
Well, we can go into both. What would you like to do first?
I like to do both and just kind of I think they naturally meld together in one idea. So I don't see any reason to separate. It's just a friend of mine said I was taking these notes and sitting outside thinking about your video and stuff and who you are. And I was writing all this down and read it to my friend, and my friend is well, he's worked professionally as a scientist at Los Alamos Labs, if that tells you anything about the kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you might not do the religious thing. And I said, well, I might not, depending on what they want.
I mean, I could understand that.
Yeah.
I will be. What is up, Tobin? Woohoo! Sending heart and sending heart ox. Woohoo! What is up? I will say that, and I often talk to this with James, my co-host, is that when it comes to religious arguments to an atheist, they are almost like they're our drug of choice. We can't help ourselves because we just, gosh darn it, we love having fun. And it also goes back to, so it's funny, you said you don't view yourself as an apologist.
Yeah, not really.
Funny enough, I kind of view myself as a counter apologist.
Oh, good.
And so my whole goal, generally speaking, I have different lines. And, I would say the first line is I want to get people past creationism and day earth stuff. I just want to get people past the 6,000-year-old earth thing. Then we kind of get to evolution, stuff like that. Fine. I really like you to be on board so we aren't kind of destroying biology. And then at that point, once you get to like the deistic, pantheistic, ally of science, whatever you want to call it, at that point, it's just an intellectual discussion, and we might as well share a beer and talk about it because there's no harm on either side.
I think I'd mostly agree with most of that. Yeah, sure. At least in principle, I would.
And so, yeah, and with that, I'm welcome. Either way you want to go, baby, I go both ways.
Don't ever miss an opportunity. Okay, so so I thought your video was artfully done and well thought out. I'm assuming there's nothing in there that you take lightly. Is that correct?
I would agree. I like levity. I like making everybody laugh. And yet if you had to describe our channel, if I had to describe myself, I would say we are the comedy side of the philosophical, scientific, skeptic community. And so the ideas that I'm putting out are hopefully resonating. I sometimes think that I take different angles than some people, not because I am an expert in a specific science, which I think I can claim computer science, but because I think I give some emotional arguments that are tied to the intellectual, because I don't necessarily wake up every night and deal with the problem of evil. I think the problem of evil is a very big problem if you're a theist. If you're a theist of very specific denominations and religions. And so the answer is yes. Underneath all the fun, I take this very seriously.
Yeah. I can tell that you really mean what you're saying, but you're presenting it semi tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I think that's obvious. Yeah. Okay. So I think you're doing a great job of critiquing what Christians say about their belief system. I really, truly do. In fact, until it bridges over into biblical critique, I think I agree with almost everything that you're saying. And I spent a lot of time trying to argue with theists that are holding irrational positions, especially when those irrational positions are based solely in presuppositions about an ancient piece of literature, which is obviously complex. It's not simple in any way, although there are little segments here and there that are just quite obviously true and simple. Like you said, you could probably pick some morality out of the Bible, but then you could do that with Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
And I have to agree with you there. And I don't think I want to try to play the video again, since you have agreed that I had the big points in the correct order. I think we'll just go from here if that's okay.
Sure.
I mean, you know what it says, and people are welcome to they're welcome to go back and review it as much as they want.
And I think my message stands still. These arguments, a lot of them are thousands of years old.
Sure.
And so when you deal with things like the Kalam, it is often presented as you just found it in the latest science journal. But we've been dealing with this since some arguments, probably 3,000, 4,000 more in oral and written. And then there's things like the Kalam, just in the under 1,000 years ago.
I think if you look at tonight's conversation in a progressive way, you're actually going to find me giving you new arguments.
Hey, I will say, I think you were saying before, you find probably a lot of allyship in both sides of the camp, depending on the person, because you probably I will never call you heretical, because that sounds good to me, because to me that's all for the theist to decide, and I'm like, all right, you guys suss that out, and when you're done, let me know.
Well, if it's true that church fathers spoke to the Holy Ghost, but they don't agree with each other, then A, the Holy Ghost is a liar, B, the Holy Ghost never existed in the first place, C, they're liars.
Well, I find the concept of a Holy Ghost interesting. I would have to really learn more about it. I'll give you some background on just where I come from. I come from a Jewish background.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually I actually would find this interesting, because I would like to even talk about what version and what doctrines of the Bible you think are the main key. The Kalam is only useful if you already believe. Well, the funny thing about that is that that's probably true. I agree with you. And then I would say the other thing is, I believe arguments like the Kalam are made as a reaction or a response to skeptics. I believe that there is a lot of tension from both non-believers and those in other religions. And so the best of the religious community try to come together and put forth arguments to try and defend the faith.
And that in the case of the Kalam, the best of the best was an argument for being Islamic. By the way,
And that is the funny thing about the Kalam, is exactly that. Was a specific Muslim apologetic, and it was not really referenced in the Western world, really Christian apologetics, until, gosh darn it, William Lane Craig and this new wave. They really have glommed themselves on and become the new inheritors of it, because that's all we mostly get that argument from. But yes, that's the funny thing about Kalam. The other thing I dislike about Kalam is that I think it has fuzzy language. You know, when you start to say things are coming into existence and stuff like that, it's very hard to get a real solid definition of what that means, because you could say, from a physics definition, does anything even begin to come into existence? I was just talking about this with on a channel about chocolate milk. You could say chocolate milk is one thing, but you could also say that there was the chocolate and there was the milk. There was technically a period when they were two things, but they were always different, the same stuff, right? And created or not. Yes, they already existed, and I don't know. It's very fuzzy and, dare I say, politically correct language, which they also don't, because when you're trying to obfuscate.
All right. But I think that's exactly the case. Okay, so in the objection to Christianity, which I don't take these as objections to the Bible, actually, but I think what's being reviewed in the video is logical inconsistencies within Christianity, which are actually against the Bible, which I find that interesting alone by itself. A lack of necessity, I think, was the first point made. Like, why does there need to be a deity? Would you want to expound on that any?
Sure. I have been coming into a lot of contingency arguments of why, a god might be the contingency of mankind, why there may be a necessity for something like that. I struggle with that deeply for many reasons. I struggle with that mainly because of my views of consciousness, and I won't go too deep.
That's going to be another talk. Yes.
But because of that, I will make the opposite claim in necessity. I believe, because of my views on that gods are contingent on humans. And so I think we are the necessity for gods.
Well, that's very interesting, because you'd be in agreement with the Bible according to the way I'm reading it.
Okay.
For instance, if I ask you, what's the Christian definition of God? Can you give me something reasonably short?
The Christian definition of a god. I am going to say, I really need to start
what is their God?
Oh, what is their God? I really need to put an asterisk on this, because I think that every Christian has their own definition of a God on the same pew. I think if you ask someone from the right and someone from the left, I would think that they have different definitions. But I'm just trying to
do the overlap.
Sure. I believe that they think that the Jewish Messiah had been sacrificed as an atonement for the sins that took place in the Garden of Eden. And because of this, you can have a personal relationship with, I don't want to use too much language. They like to use the word Father, but God, and it often correlated. I would also add, because the Christians and the Jews, I would say some form of heaven, or not the Christians and the Jews, the Christians and the Muslims. So I would say that kind of general thing, with, it like I said, with a big asterisk, because a lot of theology is debatable.
No, I thought that was pretty good. If I missed any high point, let me know. Jew, Messiah, Garden, Sin, Redemption for Ascension.
Sure, that sounds like a pretty, what I hear many Christians tell me.
Sure. Where in there was the word wisdom?
Was the word wisdom?
Yeah. Well, let me start at
Well,
the beginning. Where in there was the word spirit? Nowhere.
Was the word spirit?
Now, I'm not saying you did a bad job. You did a good job. But why is it that from Christians, the first thing that jumped into your mind wasn't the word spirit? And then after that, the 7 divisions of the spirit, which are in the order given: wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation. Why isn't that what got drummed into your head?
I guess why not spirit is that, to me, it's a more nuanced concept. It gets more into, if I'm correct, things like the Trinity.
Yeah.
And that is something that is, I know it's even debatable to Christians. I know they're non-Trinitarians. I know that it was debated and fought on until there was really an ironed out, depending on which denomination, theology. And
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There's about 5 or 6 different irons on that fire, actually. So I don't know that it's ironed out, not at all. So there's a line from within the Bible that directly says God is spirit.
Okay.
Now, I don't know why Christians aren't talking about that, because that line has nothing to do with physically acting on reality. Nothing at all. It has nothing to do with a physical place called the Garden of Eden. Has nothing to do with that. Because the idea of spirit there, or ruach, is the idea of breath, that which you don't see but you feel. Okay. Now, I don't hear Christians saying you'll never see God. But according to the definitions there in the words, you shouldn't be able to. And then it talks a lot about the 7 spirits and the repercussions of all the 7 spirits. So I would say you actually did a pretty good job of describing how Christians, except I would ask a little bit of clarity. You ever heard of words that like start with the word omni in description of God?
Yes.
And how many of those do you have right off the top of your head?
The 3 omnis: the omnipotent, omnibenevolent, all powerful, all knowing, all seeing. I'm trying to remember the last one.
Yeah, there's 4. You're right.
Generally speaking, my always joke is the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe cares what I put up the butt. So that's generally how that line goes.
Yeah, well, that's another interesting topic, actually. So you're right. Christians say the quad omnis all the time: omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipresent. They say it all the time.
Yes, everywhere. Sure.
Right. Okay. Would you happen to be aware that is actually nowhere in the Bible? None of those 4?
Well, I will say I've been waiting for that to. I've been trying to read the Torah or going through the Old Testament, and I've
Right.
been waiting for the omnis. I've been waiting for the all powerful, all knowing, all seeing, and
Well,
I
you're going
will.
to complete it. You're going to complete the whole story, including the New Testament, without finding them.
That wouldn't surprise me. It sounds so. Basically, it's an ad hoc. They've been trying to glom that
Well,
on.
it's kind of like if you said to me, you know absolutely every screw in the car that you drive. And I go, great. Amy knows every screw in every car ever driven. That's not the same claim. Now, I might believe that you memorized every screw in every place that they are in a singular car. I would believe you on that. Sure, a person could do that, but you couldn't possibly tell me every screw that was ever in every kind of car ever driven. That's impossible.
Yes, it sounds. I mean, they hate it. It sounds fictional. That's really the only, because I don't know how you would get situations where um, he is being able to know the past, he is able to know the future. I want to know, what does present, there is no such thing as a present at that point, because you are everywhere at all times. It I don't understand. It then creates very weird, I believe, contradictions with the Bible. It, in my head, going back to the problem of evil, it would mean that a God waited, had an infinite amount of time, but then chose, and then was like, hey, now is the time to actually go and make the sacrifice.
I think
And
that's going to
so
be under suffering and divine hiddenness, though.
that is probably true.
Okay. So back to necessity,
Sure.
because I don't want to keep you, for 30 continuous hours. Although I'd love to have you for 30 continuous hours. Actually, I would. That'd be great. Um,
And I'm
okay.
having fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad. And I hope I'm making you exercise your brain at least a little bit, although you're probably not very
Absolutely.
surprised by much of this. Okay. So,
No, I like this.
okay. So, immaterial constructs such as
Okay.
wisdom, knowledge, counsel, understanding, fear, power, and conservation. There's nothing material about any of that. I could no more hand you a bucket full of conservation, and certainly I wouldn't know what color it is. You know, uh,
Sure.
so unless we can't agree that there are immaterial constructs, can we agree that those exist?
I believe that there are constructs. I do believe, I will say, can I put an asterisk on something that I love
Sure.
my asterisks? I believe that there are two options that we have that I'm aware of, and that is matter and energy. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we're made of matter. I think that we have thoughts that are made of energy. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example of, I'll agree that there are abstract constructs, but I just want to show how one of that would work, at least from my secular perspective, like wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom, in my opinion, is experience, oftentimes personal lived experience. It's not
Oh
that
yeah.
I had I went and got a fancy certificate from here. It's that I went out, I did something wrong here, here, and here. And then after I ironed that out, I was able to succeed. And then when someone asks me, how do I do this? I say, look, you do it, just avoid this, this, and this. And someone goes, wow, how did you have the wisdom to know all that? And it's like, well, I did it
And failed.
and failed
Right on. And you
until I
gained
came
something.
back.
You learned something from your failures. But I would actually contest to everyone that they only ever learned from no, and no one ever learned from yes.
Absolutely.
That sure seems
Yes.
that way to me. Okay. All right. So, would you like show me the physicality of language?
The physicality of language, as in
Sure.
the physical component to language.
Right.
So,
As its primary construct, if you could show me the physicality to language, not your brain exercising language, that's not language. Not your
sure.
emotional responses to language, that's not language.
But the question is then, what is language? And I believe what language is that we are trying to convey concepts. I'll say dual things. We're trying to convey concepts to other people, and we are trying to help our own mind wrap our head around concepts.
Sure.
We have all this stuff going on in the world. We are, to be fancy, we are rendering in real time and doing all this stuff. And we look at a river, and eventually you need to have a way of communicating. We're all now going to cross river. And so we develop this system that is, I believe, gotten more complex over time. Something just interesting I learned the other day, that the Inuits have 8 different words for snow.
Yes.
And why? Why does that happen? And it's because in their environment, that is what you need to know. And so you're going to have a lot of different expanded expertise in your language based on your community and your environment.
Yes. Okay. Well, irony. That's what we're doing right now.
That's right. That's right, baby.
Okay. So you had certain brain states and ideas, and you decided, you chose to express them to me in a way that you thought I could understand, which was not Swahili, because you're aware I don't speak Swahili.
True.
And you might not either. But instead, what you did is you chose an agreed upon known code by both the sender and the receiver, which they had established prior to you even speaking on that particular topic. So we have a commonality of terms and general definitions, and then within that, context and usages, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So what happens there is you require awareness and I require awareness in order to understand. You require a code set that I have to agree to and be able to use. And then you encode your thoughts, translate them through some physical medium, in this case, the internet, computer, speaker, right? And then my ears pick that up. My brain retranslates that back into electronic signals, which I decode using that same rule set so that I might, maybe if I'm lucky, understand what you just said.
That sounded like a coherent way that we are communicating information to each other.
Right. And there are no exceptions, by the way.
And I will say, it's always interesting when you hear a language that you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so you can hear the different mnemonics, ways that our language and our brains develop, just linguistics. You can tell even when people are having a question or making a joke, or all of that stuff. And it's just like how Latin, I'm trying to remember, Latin and English came from the Romance. That I'm trying to remember. Is it English and French now?
It's all the languages
But
sound about the same.
Well, and I guess my point was supposed to be is that we can understand the syntax, and they kind of branch off of one another. They don't come out of nowhere.
No, they certainly don't. Can you use words to describe an immaterial object?
Can you use words to describe an immaterial object? Can you give me an example?
I think you have feelings.
I think you have feelings.
Or I think there are social constructs.
I think there's a decent amount of evidence for those type of statements.
Okay. So even if, never mind the truth value of my statement, but the fact is I made a statement that referred to something else, and even the something else I referred to was not grounded in physicality.
It's not grounded in physicality, because I'm going to once again, it goes back to either our thoughts or the actual brain matter. Because when you're actually talking about a social construct, what is up, James? When you're actually talking about a social construct, you are dealing with sentient, introspective creatures. You're dealing with a software system as well that is trying to interact with other beings. And so the rock being real, I think, would happen without brains. Would tribes happen without brains and humans and all this? No. Would tribalism happen without brains and humans? No, I don't think so. But it's kind of like, as far as I can tell, two separate buckets. And most of what I've come across fits easily into them.
Well, I'm sorry, what are the two buckets again?
It would be either physical, or we are using electrical signals to generate thoughts, where we're having energy. Our minds, our neurons are building a system so that we can comprehend. They're doing their job so that we can sit there and say, should I be smiling right now? Am I thirsty? Should I drink something? Those type of thoughts aren't physical in like the rock.
Sure.
But they could be physical as in the electrical synapse that's firing to give you that thought. That is physical.
Okay, that's enough that I think we're agreeing on this. Okay. All right. So yes, thoughts that you have physically manifest in synapse, and we can see that. It literally does happen. In fact, certain sets of synapse and memory cues and emotional attachments to things can cause you to generate hormones, and you can feel a certain way when you're under the influence of some certain hormone, such as fear or sexual tension or any number of things. Fight, the will to make battle, to war, is one of those things.
Fortunately.
So yes, there's definitely physical manifestations of these things, but I want to be sure before we move on from there, for making an argument from necessity of God, and what I think the Bible actually reads, and never mind what Christians say about it, that's pretty damned irrelevant. Yeah, I'm sorry, but it is.
No.
That there is not only the chemical electrical manifestation of thoughts, but there's the quality of the thought itself, which is neither chemical nor electrical.
So I am skeptical of.
Okay.
I know they call it qualia.
Yes.
I'm not saying that we don't have an experience. In fact, that would probably be my claim. I don't think there is really a mind-body problem.
Okay.
I think that in that dilemma, you're going to have the mind that is nested under the brain. And I think that you actually need to accept that we are all of our senses and all of the sensory data being able to be an emergent property. So you could
Actually, I was going to use that very term.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I think what's evidently true is science does not know all things. Science would eventually, I don't know how much time that is, learn all things. There are certain things we haven't had time nor resources or whatever to investigate. And I believe that we are 100% material, but there's materials that we have not discovered that are in us that give us some of these quote unquote emergent properties. And there's nothing mysterious about that. Eventually.
So I agree at least with the last half of your sentence.
Did you have some objection to the first or?
Well, I don't believe that there's going to be a mysterious element. In my opinion, in fact, I'll talk about the last point. In my opinion, what has clogged a lot of views of consciousness is that while it is mysterious to a degree, there are many elements of consciousness which are not mysterious. And I would say in not accepting the mundane, we sometimes miss the mark on what it's going to take to make artificial life and artificial consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example because people just want to be the floating consciousness. But if you took away, say, your ability to have pain throughout your body, if you took away all of your extremities, if I started to strip one by one everything but the actual conscious mechanism, the mechanism which is just there to experience and really have a check on what is going on the second after it happens, I think we miss the mark, because it's not going to be something like qualia. It's going to be something mundane. It's going to be trying to figure out how to create an artificial bladder, an artificial stomach, because I believe that consciousness, just because it's like an emergent property, you're going to need a artificial digestion. And although all of those things seem off topic to consciousness, and I actually think they are extremely relevant and part of the reason why we sometimes have a hard time replicating it. We want to throw the bag away, all the meat and all the downsides, and yet a lot of that is actually what gives our consciousness such sweetness.
Two things you bring to mind saying all that. The architect spoke to Neo and said, I don't need to finish that, I suppose. And also, no, let's just skip ahead. That's getting boring. Okay,
I'm having fun.
I think that, yeah, you would need sensors on your sensors for your sensors of the sensors. You need a complete system. Oh, and this is interesting as well. Sensory deprivation chambers. I think the record right now is less than 2 days, and it was done by I think a Taoist monk. The details are a little foggy. I only looked at it once. Who was able to do it for 36 hours, but most people are losing their minds in 20 minutes.
Because it is so
this thing, because you don't have one of these.
Exactly. Well, it's such, we are so used to, we're actually bombarded by experiences. And my joke, I have a simple test for you to prove that consciousness is not everything you see. All right? On the count of 3, we're all going to close our eyes. All right? 3, 2, 1. All right. Now I'm talking to you and you're hearing this, but just notice the whole HUD, the whole graphics unit went away. But notice the graphics unit isn't consciousness. You're still conscious and thinking just fine, and you can open your eyes, and there we go. But we are bombarded by it, and just that is why sensory deprivation, imagine losing almost, all of your outer senses.
Right. So I think that results pretty quickly in insanity, at least for most people. So I guess we agree there. So, so all of this was to establish groundwork. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I would agree with you. Sorry, Kitty Overlord. I would completely agree with you. Is that we're not built for that. I think that is why sensory deprivation is actually can be so reflective. The same with meditation. Even though I'm not religious, I believe that it is sometimes nice to just cut out all the noise. Sometimes it helps you reflect when you come back down to the noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk to you a lot more than this. I don't think we're going to get past the first topic. Good. So all that was groundwork to establish positions and definitions so that I knew I was talking to you. And thank you for your patience.
And I will say, I've seen debates where they've spent hours just trying to get a clear definition. Okay. And it can be hard sometimes because definitions are important to people. I have encountered someone who I believe is going to be on my channel. I think either him or someone else debating where has a very strict, what they say, biblical definition of God. And, I talk with sometimes with presuppositionalists. They'll tell you there is no other definition that except the one that they are printing. And it's normally that omni God, let me tell you.
But Amy, who thinks they're wrong and doesn't correct that, knowing they're wrong?
Well,
of course they think they're right, but the question is, can they show that consistently within the text? For instance, and yes, this is on topic still, getting to necessity. The Hebrew have a lot of words. One of those words means a group of very powerful beings. Now, that group of very powerful beings may be evil, definitionally, and may not. You have to tell by what they're doing.
Okay.
But they also have the singular form of the same word. Weird, right? Who'da thunk? So the singular form for a powerful being that may or may not still be evil, it might be good, it might be evil, you don't know, is Eloha. It's spelled like aloha, actually.
Aloha.
But it's not. I can't do it perfect because I'm not natural Hebrew speaking. But then they have the plural form, Elohim.
Which is what I was about to say. I'm familiar with Elohim.
Right. Okay, so if Elohim means a group of powerful beings, be they good or evil, is it honest to translate that as Yahweh?
Well, and Yahweh has always been a weird thing to me, to be honest, because I mean, the word itself is supposed to be the word that has no vowels, and somehow, let me tell you, those vowels found a way in there, or you're not supposed to be able to
It's actually,
speak his name.
It's Yod He Vav He.
But yeah, I will say he is a man. I know I saw, or I was re-listening to the conversation I believe you had with Nick about jealous and zeal as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's on topic, but he does seem to have many names. I will say, and I don't know what your views are. I do not have a current good outlook on Yahweh or
Right. Well, I don't
or his
imagine you
name.
should right now, actually. Yeah. So Yahweh is the spirit, having 7 attributes and lots of repercussions. The word God cannot be plural if you're monotheistic. So how are they saying we are a monotheistic religion? Elohim, which can be evil, means it gets translated as God, but means the Trinity. How can all that be true?
Well, I mean, I've never understood the Trinity to begin with. I try to I only understand it from a canon world building perspective.
Okay.
Like I've heard different models. And I guess my question then would be, do you believe that he is? So when I read the Noah story,
Mm-hmm.
are we still talking about the same God that you is that your God, or is that? I guess that's that. I guess that is my question would be, how are you claiming the Torah and the Old Testament?
Well, first, I think definitions have limitations, and the people of that time weren't like dropping f-bombs every third word. They weren't using that much expressive language. They just weren't. Okay. Now I can make a pretty complicated idea and translate it to you in half f-bombs. I could, and you'd probably still be able to figure out what I meant. But those people really weren't. They weren't using that much expression outside of definitional range of words. They weren't doing that all the time. Still within the range of the definitions. So they weren't speaking colloquially in their word usage so much that a person can't figure out what they meant. It can be figured out. But because of that, the definitions of the words are actually useful.
Sure.
They're not using them arbitrarily, that it's within range. So when the most original text, which I take to be the Greek lexicon, the Septuagint, right? I think is the most dependable thing we have to say, okay, this is the Bible. Okay. When it says Elohim, a plural, that could be evil definitionally, then I think that can't be the Trinity. And it also can't be monotheistic. In fact, you won't find a monotheistic reference to God until Adam already exists. There isn't one. So it's actually Adam makes the difference. Go ahead.
Oh, no. And actually, and I'm interested, do you believe in a literal Adam?
Well, it depends on what your definition of Adam is. Yes and no.
That's interesting.
Do I believe there must have been a first Homo sapien sapien? Well, yeah, that's kind of silly to ask. Where exactly you put that, I'm not sure I can answer you.
Okay. See, I would kind of agree with that. I would say, because I view it as more of like a gradient. And so there was never like a first Homo sapien.
I think that's Aaron Ra's main challenge, actually. And I think it's severely flawed because it's not actually a gradient.
You don't think so?
Well, it's obviously not. Like, why do we have scientists saying we need to explain this amount of gray matter that is a huge difference between Homo sapien and predecessor species? Why are we trying to justify a great change? Because there was one. Why do we have aquatic ape and mushroom taking ape for brain expansion theories if it is a very, very tiny gradient? It's very, very metered gradient. It's not.
I would say that for the most part, we share a lot in common with our ape brothers and sisters. I think it's just that
Sure.
we have because of how we we're evolved with our opposable thumbs, and we seem to be the tool makers and everything. I think we've developed kind of a niche, and so we've made all this stuff, and it allows us to be very successful.
That is true.
I would just. Are you saying that something caused spurts?
Well, I think that there are evident spurts, and not just as Tony said in the fossil record, but it is actually very, very well confirmed that there is some amount of mutation that doesn't manifest until there's a certain large buildup of mutation, and then it manifests, which is why Stephen Jay Gould and his team saying punctuated equilibrium weren't laughed out of the secular community of biology. They were not laughed out. There's a lot of evidence to that idea, both fossil and genetic.
I mean, I would be open to the idea.
This is kind of another topic, but
yes,
if you wanted to get past the gradient, whether or not it's a gradient thing, look into Stephen Jay Gould and punctuated equilibrium. I think it settles it. I think there is no gradient.
I would have to look more into the subject because from my view, it would just go from mother to child, mother to child, mother or mother, father to child. I also want to ask one more. Do you think that these spurts are from something divinely inspired or a higher presence?
Well, that's what's interesting is what I see actuality in the fossil record and in genetic survey agrees well with my reading of the Bible, neither of which things I held presuppositionally.
Okay.
But what the Bible actually reads is that a group of very powerful beings had slaves. And then there was born an entire birth cycle that lasted 3 years where males were born. That is statistically impossible through natural conception and childbirth. Okay? But it's not impossible. Logically, that can be done. All right? And then when the first ones get to 3 years old, they say slaughter slaves. Can you tell me any reason, not emotionally, I'm not calling you a slave keeper or anything. I'm just saying, what would make a slave not good to keep?
What would make a slave not good to keep?
Sure.
I think, generally speaking, I would say non-consensual slavery is evil.
And that's not my question. It's not a moral question.
Can you rephrase it again?
What makes... If lions evolved to great intelligence and they started breeding jackals and hyenas together to make their own kind of slave animal, and they were genetically altering it so that it portrayed certain traits, what would be causation for a lion to reject something as a slave?
Well, I don't know if we'd also have to say slave, because are we then saying that pets are slaves?
It depends.
I
Are
would
you working
say,
them, or are you petting them and feeding them and taking care of them? You're the slave.
well, then there you go. But I would say that I think that it transcends from the metaphorical to the literal. So you could
Okay.
say like debt slaves and things like that.
You're
But
talking about morality. I am not talking about morality. I'm asking you what makes a slave not good as a slave. I didn't say it's
what
good to
makes
have
a
slaves.
slave not good as a slave?
Yeah. What would do that?
What would make them a bad slave?
Yes.
To
What would
not
make
obey?
something a bad slave?
Not obey?
Okay. So if it was severely, and say you couldn't intimidate it or something, right? It wouldn't cooperate. That would make for a bad slave. Now, what could cause an animal to not cooperate?
If you were treating them badly.
That is not true.
Uh,
In fact, I know people who beat their dogs and beat their horses and even beat their children, and those things stay quite in line, quite well, and do exactly what's expected of them.
Some of the time, I okay.
So,
I mean,
what could cause an animal to rebel?
what could cause an animal to
You
rebel?
said if it
Everything we've
stood
been
up
talking
for
about.
itself. If it stood up for itself, what would cause that?
If it stood up for itself, what would it
Unless
cause?
I'm not meaning to put words in your mouth. That is what you
No,
meant,
I'm
right?
just trying. Yes, I'm just trying to understand, I guess, more of the context. Woohoo! What's up, Arctic Timberwolf? Can you?
Maybe you should ask me a question or something. Maybe I'm saying something. I'm probably saying something poorly. It's because I know you're brilliant, so it can't be that.
No. I'm just
sure you're
trying
brilliant, so it can't be
to.
that. But it's got to be something.
And I will say, I have really enjoyed all of your ideas so far and your questions, because I feel, sometimes it feels like other interlocutors, they're trying to look for gotchas. They're not trying to
No, I
just
really want to think about
understand other
this.
people. Exactly. Did
How
you
about
have
that?
another point? Do you want to move on? I know you
How
had,
about this
if it
one? No,
deemed the
there's a
so-called
suggestion.
owner not necessary to its survival.
How about this?
Sure. Any idea of justice?
How about this?
I have either one of those, all those. Any idea of justice? I think that you do need to have a form of justice. I'm not big on the types of justice that will often just destroy the person that we are offering justice to, because sometimes I think that offers a counterintuitive means. So it ends up not even doing what we want. So you have to
Sure.
say, this person hurt someone. What do we do to make sure that they come out of this a better functioning member of society, so they have a less chance of doing whatever it is that they did to have an infliction? You know, I
Are you
am.
talking about like prisoners of like legal prisoners?
I guess I was talking of that kind of justice. It's funny. I will say, if you want to go eternal justice, I don't have that. So I know that many theists speak about higher orders of justice. I do not
Okay.
think that exists, or
Well,
that that is
let me make
coming.
some ultimatum statements so you don't have to worry so much about
Sure,
what I'm trying to say. Slavery
absolutely.
in any form is always wrong, forced on any animal.
Okay, I mean, I guess I would agree with you, especially you said forced. I mean,
Yes.
uh, I would agree with you. I mean, I have cognitive dissonance about the fact that I'm not even a vegetarian. So I am.
Okay.
I wish. I know that seems off topic, but it's not. I really do.
No, it's
It
not.
pains me that other conscious creatures. It even pains me. So, but there's no solution. I'm a little crazy in that department, because plants are living and I feel bad. And I don't think plants are consciousness. I just feel bad because everything.
Right.
So the cycle of life, and I know that the plants will eat me one day when I get buried. So I'll look at that as a trade-off.
So I want to point out in all the suggestions throughout, even the semi-sarcastic one by Harpo Blues, there is a common thread in everything everyone said. Intellect. All of that had to do with their intellect.
Well, I think a lot of this does. So especially if you're asking about slavery, I have my own little model. I'll say it in hopefully under a sentence, which is brain, mind, consciousness, sentience, introspection. And when you're starting to get to layers of sentience and introspection,
Sure.
you really need to be asking yourself how much this being can suffer, and uh, how much we could do to minimize that. I believe, once again, I am a carnivore, but I believe in something called hotel farming. What is hotel farming? It's that we just need to treat all of the other
Like their
animals, no
guests.
matter, like their guests.
I like the
We
idea.
might as well give them the best time of their life before they end up on, serving us, or help not feeding us. Because talking about slavery, I will say, I think I couldn't see your point because I was just jumping
I haven't
ahead.
made
I'm
my
just
point.
so tired. Oh no, I agree with. Or, oh, that wasn't your point,
I haven't
because
made my point. No.
oh, well, I agree with you, because I don't know if you deal with this, but I'm just so tired of dealing with people coming on and saying that the Bible doesn't endorse slavery. Though you may, I don't know what your feelings are on that. You may say it's a different thing, or
No, actually, I would say that if you had a continuous reading frame and looked in the definitions, the Bible doesn't even address slavery. It doesn't condone it or promote it. It's not a topic. That's a misreading of the words.
okay. That may be trying to think if I should press back on that.
I can present a pretty strong case for it. But anyway, I wanted to go back to
true.
Why you would rid yourself of a birthing cycle of all males, which is a really high number of slaves to be murdered, right? And they murdered them off and only one escapes. And what becomes of the one escapes? Well, it seems that everyone suggestions, which no one said physical disability. I would have thought that would have been the first answer, but it wasn't. Like, if they can't physically work, why do you need them as a slave master, right? So like a lame horse, you don't keep it around so you have a lame horse. You just kill it and eat it, you know? In the way that it's not a moral question, or to a lot of people, it's not a moral question, what the horse is for and what you do with a horse. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. So, it's two separate subjects.
Yes. Okay. So you would just kill it and eat it if it was physically disabled, yet no one came up with physical disability, and everyone came up with the singular thread of intellect, which I totally agree with. Now let's see what happened to the one that survived. It became in charge of 1/3 of government. Now, I'm not the smartest guy that I've ever heard of, but it seems to me that it's highly unusual to put a slave in charge of your own people. Slaves didn't pay taxes, by the way. Slaves were slaves. If you're a tax collector, you're in charge of the people who are slave owners.
Are we talking about the story, the Technica Joseph?
Yes. And also Moses.
And that's another thing. Do you believe in a literal Joseph and a literal Moses?
Depends on what you mean by Joseph and Moses, whether you mean those as Christians or do you mean them from the biblical text and what it means?
Well, I mean, I would say that I don't think that Moses or Joseph were real people. I think that was oral Jewish tradition that was a way for how we transferred knowledge back then. Was the rabbis said it over and over until it eventually got written down. And my problem is actually with it getting written down is that's where you get the fundamentalists, because once it's written down, well, then you get people say, well, it says this, it says this, it says this.
It's very interesting. And so you're going to, would you confirm or deny that in Judaism, you were raised to look at it philosophically? Is that correct?
Sure. So I was sent to a conservative synagogue. And so there is 3 different branches of Judaism, which is secular Judaism, conservative Judaism, and rabbinic Judaism. Conservative Judaism is like kind of a middle. They dress in plain clothing. Think of your Ben Shapiro's. He wears the kippah, but then he wears plain clothing. Right. He doesn't probably eat bacon, but I'd be very surprised. I wonder if he really does
eat not kosher,
practice Shabbat, or I'm sure he does something. And so my mom sent me there because she thought it was a good thing to do, even though my parents definitely love bacon. And I
So
do want
remind me,
to,
the school you went to was a middle of the road school.
was kind of the middle of the road. So they took it seriously, but it wasn't,
But it's philosophical.
but it was philosophical. Most of the people were coming there because they wanted to learn, but then they go back to their life. It was both, kind of like a hybrid.
Okay. All right. So now that I understand that, and let me do some recalculations. So I'll make a faith statement, so you can understand my position better, make it easy for you. Using natural surroundings and people's experiences to explain complicated ideas is called using learning hooks.
Okay.
Now, this is a very, very normal teaching tool rather than rote memorization with no foundation. In fact, all of the American school system is based in learning hooks. So you start with a simple base idea and you hit each of the base ideas to create the hooks. And that part's really hard, and usually parents do it. And then the schools take advantage of that set that people naturally form, usually with parents, and they build on those base ideas, which is why they'll say things like teach kids colors, teach kids their basic numbers before they get to school or start working on it, you know? So,
Sure.
So we're very aware of memory hooks and how they work. So if the literature, that is the Bible in this case, is trying to use existent memory hook experiences of adults to talk about something more difficult to understand than that, then it's perfectly justifiable and logical to say it makes sense that they used existing towns, existing people, situations of war, theft, honesty, sex, just every myriad of kind of experience that we can and do normally have, and most of us experience as adults, in order to use that as an example to teach something else. Using slavery, for instance, as an example of something else, not talking about slavery itself. It's like saying apples are red, and you look at the apple and it is red, but there's a difference between me saying the word red and the skin on the apple.
Can I give you an example where I could grant you that it could find truth, but the pill to accept in that would be only if you don't read it literally and only if you don't really read it word for word. I'll give you a good example of this is the Moses story.
Go ahead.
The Sunday school or Saturday school version of that is really where the actual lesson of redemption and stuff really gets highlighted. But if you read the story literally, and it really was a God that hardened Pharaoh's heart 5 times, then to me, it would flip it from being this metaphorical story where you're trying to focus onto this. It would flip it to where this is really evil. Pharaoh is nothing but a pawn to be used in that game to be a lesson. He is made a villain.
Skip a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. I want to address what you're saying, and it's related, but it's not exactly the same topic. But I don't want to ignore what you just said. So I'm going to skip a little bit instead of doing like a continuous line.
Sure. And just to put the bow on that is that is where I parse it, in that if you really want to mine nuggets of knowledge or truth, you can do it. And I believe that almost the retellings, our ways of retelling it, are often more moral. But when you really go back to the text and you're trying to just square it up with it literally happening, paradoxes, especially you want to say all benevolence and all that stuff that I know you don't believe in, it just makes it
I believe in benevolence.
complicated.
I don't believe in omnibenevolence as a claim of the Bible. That's not there. So can you tell me what the name Moshe means?
What the name Moses? It's
Moses.
messenger, I believe.
No.
No?
No, it's the one who does the drawing out.
The one who does the drawing out. Okay.
Because it's a proper singular, meaning one, and then the rest of the definition is drawing out. Okay.
Okay.
So that's not the one who got drawn out. It's not the same thing at all. And in fact, it can't be, because it's active. And it's not past tense, it's present tense. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So Christians have that fundamentally wrong. All right. I don't want to. Christians have told you, and teachers have told you, that they're taking it literally. That is not true. If you took it literally, it reads that Moses is the one who does the drawing out. But they don't take it literally enough. And the reason they don't take it literally enough, they only look so far, is because they have presuppositions about what it's supposed to mean, which was oral tradition before it was ever written down, which thing you mentioned not so long ago in the past, in an A theory of time. But instead, what the story actually reads is that not that Pharaoh was a pawn in the acts of God. In fact, I think it cannot be read that way, even though it seems intuitive to say that. It does. But would you please explain to me how lions feel when they kill a gazelle?
I would say they probably feel pretty good because they're about to get a meal.
Now, why'd you say probably? I asked you to tell me how lions feel when they kill a gazelle.
I would say because they're my fantastic asterisk is that it's hard to extrapolate what they're actually feeling. We could just kind of empathetically say
Right.
what we assume they would be feeling as a predator species.
Okay, so really, when we say it probably, we're projecting our emotional states onto the lion.
Sure, and I'd say you could probably, once again, asterisk, make better suggestions. You could say they're probably not thinking about how to get a better chess move. They're probably not thinking about traffic, but then we could make decent enough guesses about, what does it feel when they want, talking about a river again, go up to a river and start collecting fresh water. Well, we know what it's like to collect fresh water, a glass of water, so we try and extrapolate from that.
Right. Okay. So, but it's not unfair if I say I can't understand a lion because I don't have the same emotional states.
I would say it's fair to say we can't completely map on to say
fair.
because
Now,
we're not that species.
Sure. I mean, I totally agree. Now, what's the name Adam mean?
I am pulling, but I believe it was first man.
It means red in the face like the clay of the earth.
Red like the clay, like the face of the earth. Okay.
No, red in the face like the clay of the earth.
Red in the face like the clay of the earth. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Now, the name Adam means an animal that turns red in the face like the clay of the earth. That's just definitional. Can you tell me why that happens?
Uh, why it got that definition?
No, why that actually does happen in this kind of animal that I am.
I'm not sure.
Why does your face turn red? It's not red
It
right
would
now,
be
but why does it turn red?
if you're embarrassed, maybe.
That's one. Yeah,
You could be excited,
sure.
running.
Yeah,
So could be probably both physical and mental states.
right. Now, it's not unusual for skin to turn red by a series of abrasions or temperature. That's not different in any way from a lot of animals on this planet. However, emotional states causing the skin to turn a different color is very specific to one animal that I'm aware of, human beings.
Sure. Well, I will say we are highly attuned to faces. We do something that very few other animals spend a lot of time doing, and that is staring into each other's faces. So what we're doing right now is quite unnatural in the animal kingdom. Not saying it doesn't happen, because that's not definitely not true.
Right.
But a lot of predatory species, like a cat, is trained to stare, and it basically releases that tension by pouncing. And a gazelle also stares, and it is either going to stand there and get eaten or run the hell away.
To address quickly Arctic timber wolf, I did not say we're the only animal that has emotions. I did not say that. I said we're an animal where our emotions come out in our skin color.
And it's because we are so in tune to this. We notice different facial tones, and we have things like eyebrows, which if you put on a dog, you'll notice how more expressive they are. But we have all this stuff because we're trying to convey we are a extremely social species, and it shows even physiologically.
Absolutely. Okay. And one other idea to complete that that's necessary foundationally in order to complete the total idea of what I'm reading there and what does work in definitions. What does a person have to do to catch a cold?
What does it do for... Well, interesting that you say that. I believe that we are walking, talking ecosystems. I believe that exactly. And so when we catch a virus, it is in invasive species, because virus are the edge of life and non-life. And so you have something entering our body and doing its best to become the dominant species of the ecosystem, even if that ends up taking the ecosystem down with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's really thinking about that. You use the expression "catch a cold." Did you chase after these viruses?
No, you generally don't.
So that actually they chase after you.
That is true. Generally, you are the prey.
So you're not the aggressor in that situation, but you caught a cold. Is that right?
Yes. I will say it sounds like you're doing... we have funny euphemisms and funny language.
Right. But it's not just wordplay. But those kinds of words I'm pointing out quite on purpose. You see, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Can you see the other way to look at that?
God hardened Pharaoh's heart. Do I'm not quite there yet because
Okay.
I still feel. Do you mean as in like it was a metaphorical sense? Because in the story, it
It's metaphor
seems like,
anyway. Either way, it's metaphor.
I mean, he
It didn't
he was
cause its
gonna let the
solidity to
slaves
where it
go.
wouldn't pump blood. It's metaphor either way. It's not talking about making it into a solid object that won't work.
But in my view, it's mind control.
Okay, I
It's
understood that. But Christians profess that, and I can understand you professing it, and that is a
sure.
common way to read it. But in consideration of the word Elohim, a plural set of powerful beings, which can be evil, which did create a slave class, which did alter that slave class to have nothing but males, and then killed all of them but one escaped, and then names the one that escapes Adam, who later becomes Moses, that is an animal whose emotions shows in its face, and its heart was hardened to an emotional animal. You
I
see, it
mean,
makes no, what I'm saying is it makes no sense to name something because its face turns red and that's unusual. And if you did it too, that wouldn't make any sense. If you did it too, that wouldn't be a noteworthy thing. Just like
okay,
you wouldn't name something walks upright because that would include you.
okay. So you're saying it's almost like his name was given that way because it was trying to how should I put this? It was trying to represent that. It was trying to try me one
Yes.
more time.
No,
Or
no, no,
okay,
no, no. You're
that
on the
was
right
it.
track. You're
Okay,
definitely on the right track. Okay. Now, if I get eaten by a lion, so I
okay,
stop and I make an emotional appeal. I even use the lion's natural language to make my emotional appeal. And I say, "Mr. Lion, please, I'm very scared right now." Do you think that's going to matter?
no, and that's because they don't understand our
Right.
language,
That is,
and
a
I would also
lion's heart is hardened to my emotions.
see, but the lion killing us isn't evil. I would
No,
say
that's
that
right. You're right. It's not evil to anything except the animal being killed. You are absolutely right. It is not intrinsically evil. It's perceived as evil by us. And that's a really important point against Christianity, by the way.
sure, and like I said, that is the hard part from it because I often get asked, "You're telling me there's nothing truthful in the Bible,
No, you never
or you
claimed
can't
that.
find, or no, not by you, but I often get asked,
No, I said you never
from
claimed that,
oh no,
as far as I know.
and so the hard part is that I feel like, in my view, you have a better version of
No,
what
I have a
I view.
consistent version.
See, you say okay, but from my reading, and we might have to just go from the story,
Mm-hmm.
or go one day, maybe go and we'll both look at it
Mm-hmm.
together. But to me, God needed this guy, and he needed
What? Wait, God needed
Moses.
what?
God needed a villain. God needed
Oh, that's
someone
interesting.
to op- oppress the Jewish slaves,
Uh-huh.
and needed Moses to learn a series of lessons. And it wasn't going to happen in a single verse. And so, there are parts in reading it where I got really frustrated. I remember basically getting close to tears on certain passages because it felt like the Pharaoh finally had figured it out. He's like, this is not working and I'm going to lose everything. But the only reason that the Pharaoh actually goes to reclaim Moses after he's been defeated by Moses in the snake duel and all this is because God hardened his heart. He hardened his heart, and after proclaiming that he would not go after the Jewish slaves, he then turns around. And it's hard for me not to look at God as the bad guy there.
Well, you should, according to Christians. You should be looking at Yahweh as the bad guy. Absolutely, I agree with you. The only thing is that that's inconsistent within the text, and it's inconsistent within that particular story as well. And all of that because of a presupposition saying, I go and chase down viruses. That's the wrong way to look at catching a cold. What the text says is,
I agree with your analogy.
Pharaoh is unable of understanding those kinds of emotional states.
Oh, also, what is up, Brian Stevens? Sending love.
Oh, hey, Brian.
That's right. And I will say, it has been a lovely conversation. I wish I could have more conversations like this with my theist brothers and sisters.
Thank you.
And
I want to be an accurate representation of the text. So I'm very careful. You will not hear me talk about parts I haven't looked up all the words. That's not going to happen.
Sure.
But simultaneously, I also know that I'm coherent within the stories and all of the words that are in that story. Now, I don't know someone else who's bothered. And I'll tell you why they don't bother. Because it would defeat their church and it would tear it to the ground.
Oh, and that's thank you. Something we could definitely agree on. First of all, I have to give a shout out. I am totally a fan of the name Demolish Doctrine. That sounds good to me. I'm not a big fan of institutions and higher organizations of power.
Anarchy all the way.
And so I am very much an ally to anyone that wants to fight what I find as, corporations. That's really what a lot of those churches are. Don't want to shit on every church that gives community out there for people, but there are too many prosperity gospel. There's too much.
We're coming up on 2 hours. Amy, we have to wrap this up. Can you believe that's 2 hours?
I know, it went so fast. It might have to be continued.
We're going to have to. I haven't even addressed the second topic. I haven't finished the first topic in the video.
It's been too much fun. That's why.
I have had a lot of fun, and I thank you.
Absolutely.
We're going to have to pick this up some other time. I just can't go later than this, really.
Hey, actually, this has been, they say about the perfect podcast time is between 1.5 hours and 3 hours. So if you can, we're right in that mark.
Right on. Okay, well, sweet. Oh, okay, so uh, all the presuppositions of Christianity aside, what do you think of the idea that the possibly evil, or sometimes necessarily evil, group of very powerful beings, Elohim, which make Adam, not Yahweh. Yahweh does not make Adam. That it's also another telling of the same exact situation in recollection of Moses. And the reason that the name Adam makes sense is because the namer did not have the ability to blush, become embarrassed, fear for its life, etc., like that. Which means no, it's not evil. It's an intelligent, non-emotional animal. The reason that it wiped out the slaves is because they were too smart. And that justifies why one slave can be trusted to rule a third of a nation by itself.
I will say, don't know your feelings about the beginning of that story, but man, I would not want to have brothers like Joseph. I am just going to say, what is up, Materialist Dan? Just giving a warning out there for anyone with a Technicolor Dreamcoat. Watch your brothers, because they might get jealous.
Wait, I see a chevron in a coat of many colors right here.
Uh-oh. Run, Dan,
you got
run!
siblings, run, Dan.
They're coming for that fabulous coat. But I guess in the end, he got to be Pharaoh. So happy ending for Joseph.
Well, he becomes second in command under Pharaoh's direct family. He never gets to be in charge
True,
of.
it's like the dad or whatever.
Um,
Still a pretty big gig. Good gig.
And just for Christians, when you borrow objects from your neighbors, like in the story of Moses in the Exodus, with no intent to return them, just want to say that's called theft.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
And it makes you a pretty shitty person.
So they stole a bunch of stuff before they left. And that's where I want to pick it up next time. Because we are going to get to the necessity of God and justification for objective morality within a truly scientific and thorough understanding of what the human animal is. Because I think that's possible.
And that sounds like a fantastic topic to me.
All right. I know that you're being sincere, that you enjoyed it. I want you to know, I'll say it again, and I'll say it 1,000 times off air to the Christians who hate you the most, that I had a great time talking to you, Amy, and I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so very much, Richard, for letting me be on here. It was a fantastic conversation. I hope to have more.
Right on. Well, you're welcome anytime and every time. Any final thoughts aside from that? Please show your channel.
Sure. Feel free to come by at youtube.com/Amy Newman. Me and my co-host James W. We do skeptic Bible studies. We do debates. I even upload some stand-up comedy on there. And we are come one, come all, as you are. Don't want to mute or block. We want you to talk and have good conversations. Theist, atheist, whatever your label is, send in love. And thank you all for coming on to Demolish Doctrine with Richard. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel.
That's very nice. Thank you so much. All right. So I'm not going to add anything to that. I'm just going to say I want you all to know that I truly look forward to the day that we're all great friends. And good night.
Bye.